Good morning, my name is Mark Tichelaar and I'd like to welcome you to this live webinar, Gain More from Your Brain. Good to see that so many of you showed up, so I'm really excited to give this first training to you. Let's get started. So let's get started with some basic elements that always come in hand. First of all, we're going to talk about concentration. So please turn off the sound of your phone and maybe put it out of your sight. It will be really helpful during this training about concentration. In addition to that, most people found it more convenient to follow this webinar full screen. You don't need to, but if you want to do it, you can do it in your GoToWebinar control panel. That's probably on the right side of your screen. There you can see your microphone that's automatically turned off, so I cannot hear you. Your camera is automatically turned off as well, so I cannot see you. And just below there's a button where you can push, and there you can follow the webinar full screen. Most people find that more convenient. In addition, there's a Q&A at the end of this training. So if you have any questions, please write them down on a piece of paper, because during the training, for sure, there are some elements about some questions that you can ask, but mainly in certain points during the presentation. So if you have a question that you'd like to answer to, please write it down on a piece of paper, and at the end of this webinar, I'm more than happy to answer all of them. And last but not least, doodle. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the term, but doodling are those funny drawings that you make during a presentation or a conference call. Funny enough, those doodles increase your concentration with 29%. How it works, I'm more than happy to explain it later on, but for now, please doodle alongside with this webinar. It will definitely enhance your concentration. All right, before we start, let's introduce myself a bit. This is me, and let me give you a bit of my background so you have some context about this training. I was a very slow learner. I was easily distracted, couldn't remember any information, and was very slow at reading. And 2 weeks after my graduation from high school, I found out I'm pretty dyslexic. That explained a lot, but didn't change a thing. I had a tremendous hunger for learning, especially psychology. I wanted to study neuropsychology, but I had already a challenge with reading a newspaper. So that was a huge challenge. Funny enough, I still started that study. Maybe not that wise at that moment, because it meant that I made very long days. Like I studied for 60, sometimes 70 hours a week. I was not very good at it, so went one ear in and the other ear it went out. So my effectiveness was very low, and I was very close on my way to a burnout. At that moment, I realized this is not the way to do it. So there needs to be a change, and the change for me entails how does the brain work? I want to know everything about concentration. How do you concentrate? How do you remember information? How do you absorb information faster, better, with a better retention? How does it work in your brain? So what I do, I studied everything I could my hands on about the brain, especially neuropsychology. So I read a lot of scientific papers. And every scientific paper about concentration or memory or speed reading for that matter, I applied on my own. And that went really well. And eventually I combined it into one system, and that system is called the Hughes-Clarke method. And this is something that I'd like to discuss and teach you in this first introduction webinar. I started to apply it on my own study, neuropsychology. That went really well. Officially it stated you need 40 hours to complete that study per week. Once again, I did it in 60 or 70 hours a week, but I could now reduce it to 8 hours a week. I'm not saying it here to impress you or to press up on you, but I love to show you what's possible when you know how to use this system. The funny thing is, this has nothing to do with intelligence. It has nothing to do with age. The Hughes-Clarke methodology consists of skills and using your brain in a different way, and therefore making it easier to stay focused, to make it easier to remember information or easier to absorb information faster. My fellow students who were not dyslexic realized, hey, I want to have the same results, so I developed a training. And in first training, that was in the local pub in my university city, I gave yes, a mini training in essence to my fellow students that eventually turned into a formal training. And I'm really pleased to say that we now train over 100,000 participants around the world. So that's a milestone that we hit. We're really proud of that. I wrote 4 books on the topic. They're now translated into several languages, including in English, and it should be this slide. Those are my 2 latest books. I'm working on a new book that will be probably around November next year in store. So, having said that, that's the introduction. More important, what are we going to do? Now, the things that I like to discuss first are the universal challenges that we all face when we deal with information. And this is a question that I have for you that you can answer in the question box. The question that I have for you is, if you were to think how much information is coming at you every single day. Let's say you're printing out every text message, every Facebook message, every email, maybe the conversations that you're having, and you're printing it out on a piece of paper. How many pieces of papers do you think you need in order to print out every information that's coming at you every single day? And let's say you're going to print it out on newspapers. How many newspapers do you think you need in order to print out every information that's coming at you every single day? Please give a comment in the question box. How much newspapers do you think? Alright, I'm not seeing any comments yet. It's impossible to calculate. Yeah, there is actually, Fabio, there is actually a distinctive number to it. 1 billion, says Enrico. No, it's a little bit less than that, I can tell you that. I see 3, I see 10, I see 1,000. All right, the correct answer in this case is 174 newspapers. This is the amount of information that's coming at you every single day. A scientific study calculated that, and this is the answer they gave. The question is, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that information? Well, by working with over 100,000 people, we found out there are some universal challenges to that. The first challenge, and maybe the most important one, we are easily distracted. And you might have a similar theme for yourself. Most people find it very difficult to stay focused. And maybe you have something similar. Let's say you're reading an article or you're reading a book, and halfway through the page you realize, oh, I have to call Luca. Oh, I have to do this. Oh, I have to call Marcio. And at the end of the page you have no clue what you just read. Did you ever had an experience like that? How do you deal with that? I coach a lot of people, and one of the people that I coach is a quite famous investment banker in Hong Kong. And the interesting thing about that guy is he's very, 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 very smart. He's originally from India. He belongs to the top 2% of most intelligent people of the entire country of India. So that's wickedly smart. The interesting thing is he's easily distracted. He cannot remember information that well, and he reads very slowly. So it's not intelligence that is a success factor. It's the skill level in this case. So what we do, and the first thing that he said, and I couldn't agree more, concentration equals performance. If you're not concentrated, what is the value of your mind at that moment? This is interesting. So let's say you're reading an article, but your mind wanders off. Are you still able to absorb the information accurately? I doubt it. If you're writing an article, same thing happens, you wander off. It takes you way more time to complete that article. So concentration equals performance, and I think this is a key component of what we do. The pure essence of the Hughes-Clarke method, in essence, is to increase your concentration first, and then increase reading speed, memory capabilities, and therefore performance. But it all starts with the first foundation pillar, concentration. To give you some numbers on this part is, you see a picture of a goldfish. Did you know that a goldfish can concentrate longer than we do? A goldfish can concentrate for 9 seconds. We humans can concentrate for 8 seconds. Can you believe it? Now you could argue a goldfish has nothing on his mind. Fair point. But it is very interesting that a few years ago, in 2012, we could concentrate for 12 seconds. So it's diminishing. Our concentration span is getting shorter. And the question is, how is this affecting your work? Interesting thing. Second challenge. Sorry. We read too slowly to read it all. To give you a more accurate number, the average reading speed is around 200 words per minute. The average speed that you should be able to read in order just to catch up should be, according to the UN, 400 words per minute. So there's a challenge. The effect is that most people only scan information, or half reading information, or not reading the information. But by definition, you're missing information. And Warren Buffett, one of the most famous investment bankers of all time, has a beautiful quote: "Risk comes from not knowing what you're doing." If you're half reading the information, or you're skipping or scrolling through the information and not reading it all, by definition you're missing information. And the question is, how is this affecting your decision making? This is interesting. We have a lot of examples, and I cannot give you the names of the companies with that we have the story itself, but a lot of examples of big public mistakes people made within companies that are, well, public companies, simply because they didn't read page 4 or didn't read page 23, and therefore made a huge mistake. They're simply overlooking some simple facts. In one case, it was a $300 million mistake because someone didn't read or entire department didn't read page 23 of a specific document. Mind-boggling that has such a huge effect on your work. The third challenge, and once again, this is quote-unquote the bad news. The rest of the trading is all the good news, how to overcome those challenges. But I found it really important to tell you this information first, because we simply think, oh, I have a high IQ, or I have a lot of experience in my work, therefore all the information that's coming at me, that's totally fine. But most of the time, that's the start of the challenge. Most people forget information really fast, so they can't use the information anymore. Once again, most people read too slowly to read it all, so they miss a lot of information. And a lot of people have a very, very short attention span, so they cannot focus anymore, and therefore they cannot do their work anymore. This is, by the way, very burnout or stress related. So what you now see is like almost an epidemic of burnout, an epidemic of stress and overload and overkill. That's very much related to how well you're able to concentrate or to block out distractions. So this is something that I love to share with you as well. Coming back to the last point here, we're forgetting, or almost the last point, we're forgetting the information really fast. To give you an overview in how fast we forget the information, let's say this circle represents the information that's very relevant to you. So within an article, not every point is that relevant maybe, which is totally fine, but let's say this circle represents all the things that you absolutely want to remember. Within 20 minutes, we forget about 40% of it. Within one day, that's close to 70%. Can you imagine? In 1 week, that's close to 80%. So let's say you're reading a very interesting article right now, and next Friday, or you're having a meeting with clients or with coworkers about that article. You could only recall about 20% of it. Can you imagine? This is having a big effect on your work. Final and last question that I have for you, and then we go to the good news, the method, and therefore how to overcome concentration, reading speed, memory, etc. And it has to do with reading from screens. Here you see a text in Dutch, which is totally fine because you don't need to read it. It's just an example. But my question to you is as follows. Let's say you have to read a very complex article, let's say 20 pages. And you have to read it thoroughly because next Friday, once again, you have to give a presentation to clients about that topic. Now you have two options. Option one, you must read it from your screen, as you can see here. Or option two, you can use the paperback version, the book, the actual printed book. What do you prefer? Please give the comments in the questions. Paper or screen? What do you prefer? Paper, paper, paper. Option 2, paper. Screen. Fabio says paper, screen. Paper, paper, paper. All right, most people definitely prefer paper, and only a few of you say, well, screen might be okay, which is totally fine for sure. However, an important point to realize is whenever you read information from a screen, your productivity drops with 30%. And this has a significant effect on your work. Reading from screens is for your brain and for your eyes absolutely different than reading a printed out book. And maybe the most simple way to explain it sorry, is that whenever you read a paperback version or a printed book, after you read that information, you could probably recall, oh, that argument or that theory, it was located on the left page, just below the image. Do you know what I mean? Did you ever have a similar experience with reading from a screen? It's much more difficult. Because we scroll through text, the physical location of the information changes, and therefore it's much harder to remember the information. So that's a challenge. So that's absolute challenge. All right, let's look at the good news, the Hughes-Clarke method, which is designed to overcome all those challenges, including reading from screens. The Hughes-Clarke methodology consists of 8 brain principles that help you to gain more from your brain. It helps you to increase your concentration, increase your reading speed, absorbing information much faster, and not only reading speed, but also retention, comprehension, and all those elements. It's not just reading faster. That's no use in that. It's the complete picture. So absorbing, remembering included, and also specifically training your memory, remembering names, which is really interesting. And the essence of it is getting getting more done. This is not getting things done, don't get me wrong. I just had dinner with David Adam from Getting Things Done yesterday with his wife, Catherine. Marvelous conversation. This is a very interesting topic too, especially because you're probably familiar with Getting Things Done, which makes total sense. Getting things done is quote unquote about time management. I'm not saying this correctly, I know, but just for argument's sake here. We're in brain management to emphasize the difference here. It's very closely related, but Getting Things Done focuses more on quote-unquote time and structuring your brain in that matter. We're focusing specifically on how do you optimize the function of your brain. So there's a lot of relation between the two. The end goal is the same, getting more things done with less energy and less stress. The approach is different, but once again, complementary to each other. So it works really well together. Let's emphasize on that or dive deep in that a little bit later on. All right, this is the model. This is the model that I designed. These are the 8 brain principles. We cannot discuss all of them today because once again, this introductional training, which is totally fine. Pretty soon I'm flying to Rome. I'm really excited about that one to give the training to most of you, I think, which is great. But for now, I'd like to give you some elements that you can apply immediately to test how does it work for me in my situation, in my work, and maybe you doing a study alongside it, so you can apply the essence of it directly. That's the main goal for now. So before we dive deep in some of the elements here or some of the principles, I'd like to give you the following quote, and that's this one. How well your brain performs is not dependent on IQ or age. It's purely depending on how you're using your brain. This is not a pep talk or something like it, but this is scientifically speaking how your brain works. Let me give you an example. Let's say we're doing a memory test, and let's say I'm giving you a test about you have to remember 40 items in order without writing along. This is very complex to do. I have to remember in the correct order, so we make it more difficult. And afterwards, I'm going to distract you for about an hour. So this is the most intense thing that you can do for your brain. How well do you think you're going to perform on that test? If you perform more, if you have more than 4 words in order, you did a marvelous job. So let's make that clear. But here comes the interesting point. This test says nothing about your intelligence. It says nothing about your age or even your memory, which is funny because this is a memory test, right? The score that you're getting in that test purely stated the method that you're using, the effect of the method that you're using. To be more precise, if you're saying to me, Mark, I use this method, I can predict your score. If you're using method A, I know for quite certain you only have 4 items correct. If you have method B, roughly 7 items, etc. And here comes the interesting thing. Let's say during the trading you discover a very effective method. Let's call it method D. And we're going to do a similar test for the new words for sure. Similar matter, remember them in order without writing along. And afterwards I'm going to distract you for an hour. Only this time you're applying method D. I know for a fact that you can easily call 80, 90 or even 100% correctly. Did you become smarter? No. Did your memory improve? No. Your skills improved. And this is the core, this is the essence of the entire method that we're discussing. All the principles that you're seeing here are designed to optimize your performance in concentration, in absorbing the information, or in memory. This is the core. But it all comes down in how are you using your method. And by once again working with those 100,000 participants and 100,000 clients, we found out the difference between the people that are really successful, meaning they get a lot of things done with less energy, versus the people that are close to a burnout, is how they use the brain, and probably they're using it in a different way. And once again, this is the core of the Hughes-Clarke method. All right. Having said that, let's look at the first principle. And the first principle, you're already seeing it, it's called filling the void. What does it mean? It has to do with this quote. Your brain thinks faster than when you're using it. If I was to draw it, it looks a bit like this. Let's say this is your brain capacity. If we were to give it a number, the average thinking speed is 1400 words per minute. So in 1 minute you can think of 1400 different things. The average task, reading, writing, listening, speaking, thinking, only requires a small percentage of that. The average reading speed, like we discussed earlier, is around 200 words per minute. If you read 200 words per minute, it means that you have a lot of time left, or a lot of capacity left, to think of other things. Oh, I have to call so and so. Oh, I have to do this and this. Oh, I have to email Fabio. Oh, blah, blah, blah. At the end of the page, you have no clue what you're just reading, right? So one way to fill that void is speed, increasing your reading speed in this case. If you're not reading at 200 words per minute, but let's say you're reading at 400, 500, 600, 700 words per minute, you have less capacity left to think of other things, and therefore you're automatically more concentrated. We have an increase in focus, you have an increase in comprehension, understanding the text, and that will lead to a better retention. It becomes easier to remember it. So concentration, comprehension, and remembering the information, it's like a spectrum. If you're not concentrated, you can forget about memory. It's gone, it's not going to work. So it all starts once again with an increase in concentration. So this is a fascinating thing. So this is the first element that I like to challenge you on. So whenever you find yourself being distracted for whatever reason, which is totally fine, increase your, let's say in your reading, increase your reading speed a bit. Or when you're typing, type a little bit faster. In the beginning it feels a bit awkward. You don't need to double your reading speed or just normally read as you normally do, but slightly increase your reading speed as a tool to increase your concentration. That goes well for your own thoughts, like the distracting thoughts that you have. Oh, I have to go to the grocery shop to buy some milk. Or maybe a co-worker who's talking a little bit too loud. So both the external distractors as well as the internal distractors you're blocking those out by increasing, or in this case filling the void, by increasing your reading speed slightly. So in this image it looks like you have to double your reading speed. I like to do it in this way because it makes it more clear to understand. But in reality, just slightly increasing your reading speed is enough to stimulate your brain and therefore to fill the void. Make sense? So this is the first principle. There's way more to tell about filling the void because there are 3 more elements to fill the void. This is just one element of it. I'm using this element as well, and maybe too fast. I get to comment on that, so I will slow down a bit. This is my enthusiasm. But usually when I'm giving a training, especially in my own mother language, which is Dutch for Dutch people, so there's no language barrier for both of us. And I'm always using the speed of my speech to fill the void, in this case, of the listeners. If I was to talk about the brain in this speed, you probably fall asleep, right? Or think of other things, or doing other things. So if I increase my speech a bit by increasing the speed, I give you less time to think of other things, and therefore you're more engaged. And of course this is a balance. If I'm going too fast, and once again I might have the tendency based on my enthusiasm, I will lose you as well because it's not easy to understand it anymore. So if I was speaking too slowly, you will fall asleep or wander off. If I speak too fast, you will miss information. So for me, that's finding a balance. But this is a tool as a trainer that you can use during your trainings to see, hey, people are paying a little bit less attention. Increase your speed a bit of your speech. This is one way of doing it. Another element, and you might do it currently, let's slightly discuss it a bit, is doing a simple activity. That's another way to fill the void, and you might do it currently by doodling. Doodling, those funny drawings that you're making maybe right now, is a very simple brain activity, meaning you can easily listen to what I'm saying, but it is just enough brain capacity, or it costs just enough brain capacity to block out the irrelevant thoughts, and therefore you're more, 29% more engaged with the presentation. So as a trainer, you can ask your participants or course participants during a training, hey, if you want to pay fully attention to this training, funny enough, make drawings, make doodlings during the training, and automatically you're more engaged with the presentation. This is interesting. All right, let's continue. Once again, there's way more to tell about this chapter or this brain principle, but I like to give you an overview of a few elements so you have a broader view instead of one principle where we dive deep into. Once again, in the training that's coming up, I believe in October, we dive deep in all the elements of the principle, of all the principles, and dive deep in all of them with a lot of exercises, questions, etc. But for now, I'll give you a small overview. All right, let's move on to the next brain principle, which is limit your brain. And this is maybe funny to say, but this is a very instinct thing. Your brain, or our brain, or all of our brains, can do the most marvelous things, but they give the best performance when you realize they have a limit capacity. And I like to do a little game with you to show you that. In a moment, I'm going to give you a small number sequence, like 4 digits. And my question to you is after I finish giving that number sequence, the 4 digits, repeat it if you can out loud. If that's not possible, which is totally fine, then repeat it internally. Very simple. Don't write along, just purely do it with your mind. Here it comes. 3, 5, 1, 2. Go. It was quite easy to do, right? This is nothing to it. All right, let's move on to the next phase. Once again, I'm going to give you a small number sequence. And once again, my question is to repeat it out loud or internally. With the difference that my question is to repeat it in reversed order. A little bit difficult, more difficult. Here we go. 7, 2, 8, 5. Go. This was a little bit more difficult, right? It's still doable, probably, but you needed to think a bit more. Did you felt that? What you felt was the forepart of your brain, the prefrontal, QAP is it's called, and the specific element that you felt was your working memory. You probably know the term short-term memory, which is actually exactly the same as your working memory, only I use the word working memory because it's a better way of describing its function. Your working memory is the first stop in your brain where you actually think. So your senses absorb the information, turn it into brain language, and then it is processed in your working memory. So listening to my voice and understanding what I'm saying and maybe translate it in your own language or how you can apply it in your own work, all happens in your working memory. Your working memory, and then the meaning of that is sent to your long-term memory. So that's in essence how your brain functions. The long-term memory has an unlimited capacity. Your working memory has a very limited capacity. Let me give you the third element of this little game. And once again, I'm going to give you a number sequence. And once again, my question is to repeat it in reversed order. Only this time, the number sequence is a little bit longer. Here we go. 5, 9, 2, 6, 0, 2, 8, 4, 0, 8, 0, 5, 1. Go. All right, it was probably too much, right? It's too much to process, and that's totally fine. It's an overload or overspilling the bucket, so to say. It's too much to process. Of course, it is on purpose. The funny thing is, this is something that we do all day long. We take in too much information at once. We process too much information. We're doing multiple things at once, multitasking, which ultimately always goes at the expense of each other. We now know from research that when you're doing two things at once, multitasking, that has a worse effect or a more negative effect on your brain than smoking weed. Can you imagine? So you have to choose between smoking weed and doing multitasking. Smoking weed is better for your brain than doing two things at once. Bizarre. When you're doing two things at once, it lowers your IQ with 15 points. You're getting dumber. Luckily, that's a temporary effect, meaning if you stop multitasking, it will eventually arise to the normal status quo, but still, it has a negative effect. So there are a number of ways to take this in consideration, and it's first of all, and this is once again closely related to getting things done, keeping your working memory as empty as possible. And here is the most famous quote from David Allen: your mind is for having ideas, not holding them. As long as you try to hold them, you're automatically using your working memory because it's an unfinished task. So it's not processing your long-term memory, but in your short-term memory. And then it's an open loop. And since it's an open loop, it's like a boomerang. It's keep coming back. It's keep coming back. And therefore filling up your working memory. And the more things that fill up your working memory, the slower your memory and your brain overall performs. So the more you keep your working memory empty, the better. So one way of doing that is getting things done. Getting things done has a very sophisticated system to do just that. But there are more ways you can do it as well. A very simple one, there are complex things and simple ones. This is a very simple one. But a very simple one is a clean desk. Research shows that we have a messy desk, and once again, this is a bit exaggerated example for sure, but just our designer found this image. A messy desk like this, or in general, lowers your productivity by 12%. Why? Your senses see all the information, the newspaper, the articles, the other newspaper, all the other articles, and they process it in your working memory. And your working memory, just like the big number that I just gave you, it's too much to process. And therefore the machine slows down. Your brain slows down. So that's one way of doing it. Another way, and this is an art and science on its own, is single tasking. You probably know multitasking is bad, for sure. To be more precise, it should state it relentless single tasking. Why? not only working on one task is good, but it goes way further than that. Whenever you try to read, or let me rephrase, whenever you try to remember what you're reading, then you're multitasking. Whenever you're writing an article and think about the structure as well as the grammar structure, the beautiful lines that you're writing down, write down, then you're multitasking. Whenever you're giving a presentation, a new presentation, and you think, how's people liking this presentation? Do they like it or not? And you're thinking of the content itself, then you're multitasking. So what we like to do during a training, and this takes more time to explain or to do, we take every task that you have to do for your job or study, and we look at ways to make it purely single tasking, meaning we separate reading from remembering. We separate the structure of an article and writing the article itself. And therefore we make it much less intense to do. Reading becomes much easier, remembering becomes much easier, writing becomes much easier, presenting becomes much easier, and it takes you less time to do those elements, especially reading and writing. So this takes more, I'd like to give you the overview of it like I'm giving you right now, but once again it takes more time to explain it in more detail, which I'm happy to do during the training that I'm about to give. But for now, I'll give you the overview. Let's use another principle to dive a little bit more deep into as well, and that's called MTS. And before I'm going to explain this principle, I'd like to explain to you a principle in neuroscience which is called attention residue. It has to do with this image. This image shows how your brain functions in the pure essence of it. So let's say you're reading an article. Oh, sorry, let's say you're writing an article. Let's give that as an example. And using the left part of the image, you can see using two parts of your brain at the full extent. So you're not using half of your brain, you're using all of your brain capacity when you're fully engaged in that task, in this case, writing an article. And let's say Marco sends me an email. Hey, Mark, can you send me this research paper, but because I like to use it for whatever. At that moment, you have the picture in the middle, my brain cannot fully be engaged with that email from Marco because a part of my brain is still processing the previous task, the article that I was writing. For an email, that might be okay, but let's say I'm moving to the original task, in this case, the right part of this image, and once again, part of my brain is still processing the email from Marco in this case, and therefore I can only use half of my brain to complete the article. This is called attention residue. Your attention sticks to the previous task. This means that it takes about 40% more time to complete the article, because I can only use a part of my brain now and not the entire brain. On average, you're making 20% more mistakes, and it costs you way more energy to do it. And this is very interesting. It takes about 23 minutes to recover from this. So after 23 minutes, after an interruption, your brain is at normal status quo. Before that, it's still in recovering mode. And I'd like to do a small test with you to show you this. For this test, you need pen and paper. You're going to use your computer, you're going to use your phone, you need actual paper and an actual pen to do this experiment. Please grab those, a simple A4 paper or a small paper, that will be fine, but a paper and pen is needed. And let me explain what we're going to do. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to write down a sentence. And you can write it down in English or you can write it down in Italian. Both is totally fine, that doesn't really matter. I'm going to give you the sentence right now. Please don't start writing yet, because we're all going to start at the same moment, because I'm going to time you on my stopwatch. So I'm just showing you the sentence, but don't start writing yet. So the sentence that I'd like you to write down in a moment is this sentence. Task switching is worse than typing with one hand. Once again, in a moment you can write it down in English or in Italian, both is fine. After you wrote down that sentence, directly afterwards, my question is to write down a number sequence. And the number sequence is simply 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, blah, 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 till 37. Why? At least in English, the sentence consists of 37 characters. So that's my question. I'm going to time you. So I'm going to tell you when to start and when to stop. I'm going to give you the time. So you're now at 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And at some point I will say stop writing. So then we can see how far did you get. All right? Are you ready? I'm giving you the sentence one more time. Task switching is worse than typing with one hand. 3, 2, 1, go. Ten seconds. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. 25. 30. 35. And I'm stopping the time at 40 seconds. You might be done, you might be still writing, both is totally fine. All right, this was quite easy to do, right? My next question is, we're going to do experiment 2. Turn the paper or fold the paper so you cannot see what you just wrote down. That's my first question. My second question is, in a moment I'm going to ask you to write down the same sentence in Italian or in Dutch. I won't say Dutch. In Italian or English, that's totally fine, doesn't really matter. Same sentence in the same language. Once again, the sentence is task switching is worse than typing with one hand. I'm also going to ask you to write down the same number sequence, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, till 37. The difference this time is I'd like you to do it task switching, meaning T1, A2, S3, bum, 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 bum. This is way more difficult. All right, are you ready? I'm going to give you the sentence one more time. Once again, I'm going to time you. The sentence is, task switching is worse than typing with one hand. 3, 2, 1, go. Ten seconds. 15 seconds. 20 seconds. 25. 30. 35. And once again, I stop the timer at 40 seconds. All right, well done. You probably felt the difference instantly, right? It's costing you way more energy, way more time, and probably making more mistakes as well. And this is totally normal. The reason for that is every time our brain needs to switch, it will cost them energy to do it. It costs them time to recover from that. Even a very simple task like writing down a sentence and writing down a number sequence. The more complex the tasks are, and all work-related tasks are more complex than this simple test, the effect is more dramatically, meaning you have a more dramatic recovering time, a more dramatic negative impact on your brain. So the solution to that is something that I call MTS. And MTS stands for minimize task switching. And this is an art and science on its own. It sounds pretty simple. You could make it very simple, but there's more than meets the eye. It's a beautiful English saying. You can do it on 2 levels. And the first level is macro level, and the second level is micro level. On macro level, you're looking at everything, the distraction or the switching that you make between tasks. So I'm doing one task and then moving on to another task and then moving on to another task. So you're looking at the switching between tasks. On micro level, you look at switching within a task. In this case, all the interruptions. So I'm working on one task, let's say writing an article, writing a proposal, preparing for a meeting, and everything that is interrupting me is on micro level, is a micro level interruption, and that's something that we like to do on MTS on micro level to resolve those. The biggest impact you will have on macro level, but once again, that is something that takes a lot of testing during a training. so we can see and we do some research together to look at everything that's interrupting you on that level. So I like to park that for now. Something that you can do straight away that's very simple and very effective is something that we call the notification challenge, or to be more precise, the notification diet. And the challenge that I have for you, and there are many interruptions, but one of them is of course your phone. And once again, during micro level MTS, we're looking at every interruption: co-workers, suppliers, clients, social media, things on your phone, things on your computer. Like, we look at everything and minimize it, all those elements. But a very simple thing to start with is look at your phone. And my suggestion is, for the next 7 days, if you want to play this game, it's totally up to you, you don't need to, is to turn off every notification that you're having on your phone. This is the challenge. You don't need to, you don't have to, but if you want to play, this is the game. And including WhatsApp, including Facebook, including email, including everything. Every notification is turned off. So not on flight modus, no, like it actually turned off. You can do it if you look at settings, and if you look at settings, there's sections called notification. It's all about messaging in essence, and every application that you're having installed on your phone has a default setting. I can send you push notification, I can interrupt you, and that's their business model, which is fine, but the question is, do you want to pay the price of that? So that's the game. There's one exception to this rule, and that's agenda meetings or agenda notifications. Agenda notifications are pretty handy to have them at that specific moment. You want to know, oh, I'm having my next conference call in 15 minutes. That's good to know. Or I'm having my next meeting in 2 hours. That's good to know. So that's the exception to the rule, but any other applications you're having on your phone, you turn off, at least for 7 days, all your notifications. Once again, only if you want to play. I did it, of course, myself a couple of years back. I was very addictive to my phone. We found out, or not we, researchers found out that notifications are so addictive that our designer found a nice image for that. Someone's taking a shot of Facebook. Every time that you're taking a look at your phone, or seeing that you're having a new message, there's a part of your brain that's being activated. There's a neurotransmitter, and that neurotransmitter is called dopamine. And dopamine is like the happy neurotransmitter, to put it simply, and every time you're receiving something new, whatever the content might be, good or bad, doesn't really matter, everything that's new has some sort of emotional interest, like, oh, I'm excited what it is. Might be great, might be terrible, but let's find out. And that creates a rush. And that rush is very addictive. Researchers found out that withstanding a notification is harder than withstanding sex or chocolate. So it is very addictive. So this is interesting. So the first few days that if you want to play this game, you will find yourself a bit itchy. You want to check your phone, or you want to do, and it takes a few days to get rid of that. But after the, let's say, 3rd or 4th day, you will feel relaxed and calm, and therefore way more effective. So that's a suggestion. All right, let's round this up for now. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you have some comments. Everything is fine. I do have some time left over to answer some of your questions. Once again, there's way more to say about the principle that we just discussed, and there are way more principles. So there's a lot to share and to discuss and to test. During the actual training in October, there will be a lot of testing, a lot of brain games, like more extensively than we did just now. We're going to see and test and apply what is relevant to me. Maybe the most relevant principle for you is connecting the dots, or actively involving your brain, or time box your brain, or filling the void. We're going to just dive deep in those, and we're going to see what's working best for you, and what are the factors that hold you back. This is not a traditional productivity training or efficiency training. The main goal of this training is, how do I make it easier for my brain to do its work? That's the goal. That's what we do. As an effect, it takes you less energy to stay focused. It takes you less energy to absorb or remember information or getting more things done with less energy. That's the main core. And once again, this is not time management. This is brain management. And once again, that is very tightly related to getting things done. All right, maybe any questions that you're having. If you have any questions regarding the principles, the training, software that we developed, because we developed software to absorb digital text way faster. Of course, you get a copy of that in a training. Any questions so far? All right, here's the question. What's the relation between limit your brain and filling the void? That's a great question. And it all has to do, let's say music. Is it good or is it bad? That's always a fascinating question. Especially when you have kids. Parents usually ask, my kid studied with music, is it good or is it bad? Well, it depends. Music, especially when it's very familiar music, goes to the background almost, and therefore it's blocking out other distractors, and therefore it's a great way to fill the void. So that could be really handy. The downside is it could turn into multitasking when your favorite artist releases a new album on Spotify and you start listening to that during your work. Then you probably listen more to the music than you're having attention for your work, and therefore it slows you down, and therefore you're multitasking. So that's the balance between the two. All right, I think if there are no more questions other than that, thanks so much. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope to see you in actual training. If you have any more questions before that training starts, feel free to email me. My email is, this is the software that we developed. You get a copy for that. My email address is quite simple. That's Mark, you can see it here with a K, @hughesclark.com. So if you have any questions after this training or about this training or before the actual training starts in October, more than happy to answer that. I hope you liked it. I hope you had some some insights that can really help you. Hope to see you soon, and for now, have a great day, and thanks so much.